What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video.
Yeah. I'm speaking truth from the cell to the streets. Did 24 years, now I'm finally free. H strong standing, no chains on me. Ex-con, ex-gang, but my soul found peace. Taught by the struggle, pain made me wise. I seen homies fall, seen mothers cry. Now I'm here to teach what the system denies. From the darkness I rose, Tupac in my eyes. This channel ain't clout, it's the scars I show. Life lessons in these rhymes so the young ones know. Dubs on the mic, watch the wisdom grow. If you walk through the fire, let your spirit glow.
The other day, when we heard about Josh, right? We went live, Gunner and I, and Nate joined the live, and you know he was like a brother to Josh, very, very good friend. And in the video, Nate talked about when he and I were on the yard in New Folsom Sea Facility, and a very, 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 very serious situation was supposed to happen that day. And I want to make a video about that, right? And if you guys, go back and watch, Gunner put the video back up. Nate talked about the day that he said we were gonna get mollywopped, and I can't dispute if it would have went down that day, it would have been all bad for the Southerners. There was 11 of us on the yard, easily over 100 blacks, and it was gonna be ugly. Now, I want to talk about what led up to that. I've already done the video, but there's certain things I don't think I talked about in that video to get you guys to understand the way things work. So, Sea Facility, well, let's just say this, first of all, because people seem to not understand this. You could be on a yard. Whatever's happening with another faction is not your concern. Kind of like the way it's supposed to be out here, right? But anyways, so on Sea Facility in New Folsom, for a very, very long time, up until 2000, and even into 2001, there were some stragglers, but up until 2000, on Sea Facility in New Folsom, the Southerners there weren't considered homies. You had a time limit. You had to get off within a certain amount of time if you were a Southerner, and if you didn't, then when somebody else comes, if they feel like getting off on you, they will. And they're not going to get in any trouble over it, right? In 2000, a couple things happened. The curfew was lifted, but also the Northerners issued a demand that they didn't want Southerners and they didn't want whites on the yard. They filed a civil rights complaint, and they were basically relegated to their housing units and concrete yard. They weren't coming out to the yard because of the lawsuit that was filed, right? So even though the Southerners were there at the time before, the lifting of the curfew, even though the guys from Southern California, I should say, were not in good standings with the ones on B Facility or anyone else, that has no bearing on the other groups, right? That's Southern politics. Now, an incident occurred, I want to say it was in 2001, because it wasn't long after we got there. Maybe the very beginning of 2002. Maybe Nate would remember. And so the Southerners, I've never seen a yard where their real estate was so small. They had half of a basketball court. The other half was shared with the Kumis. Southerners had one half. The Kumis had the other half. Southerners had one table. The Paisas had one table at the bottom of the yard. And the Southerners had the two handball courts. The blacks had one handball court. right? The blacks also had another basketball court, so they basically had 1.5, which on any other yard you won't see because the Southerners and the whites share the basketball court and the handball court together. Now, one day during yard, the Southerners were playing handball. They hit the ball over the wall. They went to go get another handball or something. I don't know. I was on the bottom of the yard. Some Crips went over and started playing handball on that handball court. Immediately, it caused a disturbance. And, there was words exchanged. And so we quelled the situation for the moment, right? Like, hey, the Kumis came over, and so we talked. We wound up talking, and then, it was said that the left handball court was shared between the Kumis and the Southerners, right? The right one was the Southerners. So on that yard, the way they're going to have it was the blacks had a whole basketball court and a half, and 1.5 handball courts, right? And that just wasn't gonna fly, right? There was gonna have to be some discussions. And so I was the one that had the discussion with the Kumis. And, one of my first things was to ask them, so you're saying that the left handball court is shared with Southerners and Kumis? He said, yeah. I said, why were there Crips on there? You guys don't even get along. They were always at odds, the Kumis and the Crips. So I was like, why were there Crips up there? So that was one thing. But, I'm not going to get into the whole thing. I'm just bringing up the point where, and this is what a lot of people don't get. The issue was this. It was 2001. A bunch of dudes came down from Pelican Bay. There were more and more knuckleheads coming. At the time, there was only, if I remember the count at the time, by 2001, at that time, there was only 120 Southerners on the yard. Probably 80, 70, 60, around there, whites. The Northerners weren't going out to the yard, but there was maybe 50 of them on the yard. Probably about 30 paisas, about 30 others, and the rest were blacks. And the main stress that in the discussions that I had with the dude was, and this was not a discussion that was done on the yard. This was done in the day room. We had to sit down in B section in 3 building, me and this dude. And I was trying to get him to understand, and I get it. They don't have to understand because it's not their politics, but it was still kind of like the sticking point. When his argument was, or his point was, I don't want to say argument, his point was, you guys agreed to this. And my point was, whoever it was that agreed with you, we would have whacked him. He doesn't speak for nobody. Couldn't go to no other spot. So you're holding the Southerners to an agreement with somebody that wasn't recognized as a Southerner. And the discussion was tense, as respectful as it could be, but there were threats made. I was told that the Southerners didn't have the numbers and that there was nothing the Southerners could do. And my response was, regardless of how many people are on the yard, it's how many people are willing to pick up a piece. I think the numbers are even. And I stressed to him that if you're going to hold the Southerners that are on the yard to an understanding that was made by somebody that the Southerners would have never respected or been on a yard with, if it's going to go to war, we're not stopping until we get both handball courts, the full basketball court, and the Kumi table. And that's how the conversation ended. The next, I think it was the next day, or I don't remember how long it was after, but I believe it was the next, no, it couldn't have been the next day. They waited. But it was on one of the days because the Southerners didn't get yard every day. They would rotate it, right? And like they would have an afternoon yard, but maybe not a morning. And so it was one of the yards where it wasn't a Southern yard. And that's why there was only 11 on the yard that day. And I remember being out there, and there was a dude, I'm not going to say his name, but he's telling us, yeah, they're about to move on us. And we were like, what? And he goes, yeah, I heard him at breakfast. Now, I was part of the leadership on the yard. I almost had this dude hit over this. I probably should have. But I just gave him a pass for being stupid, right? But I looked at him because he was a homie that was, I don't know if he was mixed with like Dominican or something, but it was a black dude, didn't know that he was a Southerner on his way to chow, and he told another one in front of him, yeah, we're gonna get off on them at yard. And the other ones like told him like, hey, shut up, that's a Southerner right there, right? So that dude had enough time, the Southerner had enough time to let the rest of us know, hey, this is what they got planned. So we could have made sure that there was going to be more people on the yard. It's neither here nor there when you're out there, right? Initially, there was only 7 of us, I think. And when I heard what this dude had to say, and I'm looking at the yard, and you can always feel it when something's going on. And you see all the groups were huddled up, the different black groups. So I told the homies, hey, go to the chow hall doors. We only have 1 and 2 dining on the big side, the yard side. I told them, hey, tell the homies, whoever can sneak out now and come on strapped. They did. Some of the homies didn't. They were like, nothing's gonna happen. And so we were separated. There was 4 on the bottom in front of canteen. They wanted to shop. And there was 7 on top. And I remember there was a broken piece of the concrete table, and it was under the table. And I remember taking my shirt off, and I tied that broken concrete in the shirt, and I put it off to the side. I remember telling the homies, hey, we're through. These dudes are gonna get us today. I said, but I'm gonna get one good swing out of that shirt, and then it's gonna be what it's gonna be. And that's why when Nate said that he remembers me being at the table, we were. That was the day we should have died. Over a piece of prison real estate. And I remember towards the end of the yard, and this was nobody's beef, but the Kumis and the Southerners. It wasn't the obligations of the Crips or the Bloods or anybody else, non-affiliate, none of them. It wasn't their responsibility to kick it off. It was the Kumi's responsibility, and then everybody else was gonna follow suit. We knew what the deal was once we saw what it was. And I remember when they announced equipment recall. That's usually, there's 5 minutes left to yard. I remember I was looking down, and all the Crips, they were all at their tables, and they started hugging each other and shaking each other's hands. And I told the homies, it's going down right now. Be ready. And we waited. They said, yard recall. The yard went in. The handball court was, from that day forward, only the Southerners. It wasn't that the Kumis punked out. Because let me tell you something, man. I used to... the dude that was the mouthpiece for the Kumis, he and I got along very well. We had to. Literally, a crack in the ground was what separated the Southerners area from the Kumis area. There's no level 4 180 that I'm aware of where there's a black faction that close to the Southern faction. The whites were over there under the central tower. Their table wasn't even near us. Usually that would have been at least the whites. I think that was one of those times where cooler heads prevailed. The Southerners were barely trying to get a foothold there because they hadn't been there. It had been dudes that, again, had been hit on other yards and just landed there and stayed there. For the Raza, that was a stronghold for the Northerners until they filed that lawsuit. The administration was doing everything in their power to try to snatch the Southerners up, slam them down, let the Northerners back out. But because of the lawsuit, and then even then, I've talked about this, half of the Northerners wanted to come out and get busy. The other half wanted to try to see what happens with the lawsuit. And so they were whacking each other. It was a real strange time in Sea Facility. But that day, at least as far as prison, I could say without a doubt, that was the only day where I felt like, hey, we might not make it through this. There was so many of them. And all of us were right there. Like, fuck it. It is what it is. That's how prison is. It don't matter the numbers. When people talk about numbers and all that, you can't change what it is. You find yourself in a situation, if something jumps, you get off. But that was just a very strange situation where, again, it was a dispute over real estate. And rules were being applied to people when it wasn't their own people that had made the original agreement. That's what I wanted to tell this story for. I wanted to tell the story because prison is that treacherous, man. We could have died that day. We could have killed people that day. Who knows what would have happened? It wouldn't have been good, though. I know that. And it was over two dudes getting on a handball court that never belonged there in the first place. The Kumis even said it. Dude shouldn't have been up there. But the thing about prison is there's I honestly believe the majority of people aren't racist. People are be like, what? People's heads exploded. If you're not part of a faction, don't tell people who were what their faction believed and what they were about. Because you believe in some propaganda that is fed to you in order to hate enough to kill. A lot of people don't understand. A lot of the stuff that they're fed in prison, it's fed to you to make you be willing to kill, to not hesitate, to hate those people. Hey, they hate you, Holmes. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. Doesn't mean it's true. Anyways, man, that's my video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys understood the message, and I'm not going to hear all this, oh, there's another one where the Southerners this. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with people could have lost their lives over some fucking real estate that no one owned. I get it. You know, in prison, that's your world. You know, you fight for whatever you have to. But people were applying rules to another group for an agreement that they would have never even agreed to. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them, man. I'm out of here.